My wife's coworker called me a domesticated husband in front of her whole office. When I confronted him after saving their biggest account, he smirked and said, "You're just the guy who made blood money sexy." I didn't say a word. That was 2 years ago. Last night, he drove past my house slower than the speed limit twice. Walking into the building where my wife works always felt like entering a glass shrine to minimalism, where my cargo shorts stuck out like a turkey at a peacock convention. The receptionist looked at me the way people look at gas station sushi, with deep suspicion and mild concern for public safety. "Vivian Walker's husband," I announced, holding up the lunch bag like a hall pass. That's when the whispers started. Over the next few months, Vivian's coworkers treated me like I was some exotic species of house pet. Xavier, the VP of Creative, had the subtlety of a foghorn in a library. He'd say, "Must be nice having all that free time while the wife brings home the bacon." I'd smile and nod. The gossip escalated faster than a toddler's tantrum in Target. Debbie from accounts would ask Vivian loudly if she needed support resources for financial stress. The peak came during their summer office party. I arrived straight from Mommy and Me music, covered in suspicious stains that looked like modern art but smelled like expired milk. Xavier cornered me by the punch bowl, his concern as fake as a $3 bill. "Listen, champ," he said, putting his hand on my shoulder like he was about to deliver a cancer diagnosis. "I've got some old suits from my heavier days. Might help with interviews." I excused myself to change our daughter's diaper, though honestly, what came out of my toddler was less toxic than what was coming out of Xavier's mouth. Everything changed on a Thursday that started like any other, with my son using his breakfast as hair gel and my daughter declaring war on pants. Vivian called asking if I remembered the client presentation Xavier had been working on. I remembered. She'd been telling me for weeks about how Xavier had been peacocking about it, calling it his masterpiece. "They hated it," Vivian whispered. "Like, threatened to pull the entire account, hated it. The CEO called our CEO and used words I can't repeat. There's an emergency meeting in an hour and everyone's panicking." That's when she added, "Our CEO is desperately calling in favors for an emergency consultant, someone who actually knows their company." I knew them all right. I'd rebuilt their entire brand strategy 5 years ago when they were hemorrhaging money. I told her to get me on the phone with Nicole, her CEO. 3 minutes later, she was on the phone asking how soon I could come in, offering to pay me triple my normal rate. "I'll be there in 30, I said, already mentally calculating which juice boxes would buy me 2 hours of babysitter time. I walked into Meridian's crisis meeting wearing my best competent consultant outfit, though my son managed to leave a small handprint of peanut butter on my collar. The conference room looked like a funeral parlor where hope had died. Xavier sat at the table, his masterpiece presentation scattered before him like the world's saddest jigsaw puzzle. His face went through more color changes than a mood ring in a microwave when he saw me. "What's the domesticated husband doing here?" he muttered, apparently forgetting that desperation had made Nicole's hearing sharper than a bat's. "This is Thomas," Nicole said. "He's going to be taking over here today." The room went quieter than nap time at a daycare. I opened my laptop, pulled up some files, and started dissecting Xavier's presentation with the precision of a surgeon. Every slide was wrong in a uniquely spectacular way, like he'd used a magic 8-ball to make strategic decisions. As I explained, Xavier's target demographic analysis was wrong, assuming their customer base is Gen X, when their actual average customer is 47 and thinks TikTok is a breath mint. Debbie from accounts was frantically Googling my name, her eyes widening with each result. Connor from strategy looked like he'd swallowed his warehouse job offer whole, but Xavier wasn't done. His pride was wounded, and like a cornered possum, he was about to make terrible decisions. "If you're so brilliant," he spat, "why are you playing housewife while your wife works here?" The room collectively held its breath. Vivian covered her face. Nicole looked ready to commit workplace violence. I just smiled and said, "Because, Xavier, I made enough money selling my company to afford something you clearly can't. Choices and competency, apparently." I turned back to the presentation. 2 hours later, I'd rebuilt their entire strategy, and Xavier had the expression of a man who just discovered his fly had been opened during his wedding. I thought all was well, and the aftermath had been sweeter than the candy I'd confiscated from my kids' Halloween buckets. Only 3 weeks later, I was reviewing my consulting invoice when something odd caught my eye. There was a voicemail I'd missed. "Tom, we need to talk about what really happened 5 years ago. Xavier just sent us some very interesting files about your old agency." My blood ran cold as I remembered the one detail I'd left out of my heroic save, that my former company had been a consultant from when they nearly went bankrupt, right before I mysteriously retired early. Vivian walked in just as Xavier's email popped up on my screen. Subject line, "Your husband's not who you think he is. I wish I could tell you it ended there." I stared at the screen, my hands frozen above the keyboard. The Bloomberg article link in Xavier's email seemed to pulse with malevolent energy. My throat constricted as I read the headline, "Meridian Consulting's Thanksgiving Massacre. How one firm's aggressive restructuring led to 3 employee suicides." Vivian's footsteps echoed in the hallway. She appeared in the doorway, her work blazer still on, concern etching lines across her forehead. Her eyes darted to my face, then to the laptop screen. The subject line burned there like an accusation. "The real reason your husband retired." My mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The room suddenly felt too small, the walls pressing in. I clicked the link before I could stop myself. The article loaded, each paragraph a punch to the gut. November 2019, mass layoffs, 3 names, 3 faces in the memorial photos, 3 families destroyed. Vivian moved closer, her hand reaching for my shoulder. I flinched away, closing the laptop with more force than necessary. The sound cracked through the silence like a gunshot. In our bedroom 20 minutes later, I sat on the edge of our bed while Vivian stood by the dresser, arms crossed. The space between us felt like an ocean. I forced the words out, each one tasting like ash. Yes, I was the consultant. Yes, I restructured Meridian, but the company was failing. They would have lost everything. I saved hundreds of jobs by cutting 50. My phone buzzed. LinkedIn notification. Vivian's phone buzzed simultaneously. She glanced at it, her face paling. She turned the screen toward me. Xavier had found her profile, sent a message. "Ask him about the Thanksgiving terminations." I reached for her phone. She pulled it back, but I persisted, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Block him, please. Just block him." She didn't move. Instead, she opened Google on her phone, typing with deliberate precision. "Meridian 2019 layoffs." The search results loaded. She clicked the first link, a memorial page. Her finger scrolled down, stopped. Her sharp intake of breath told me she'd found it. The description of the unnamed consultant who recommended holiday terminations to maximize psychological impact and minimize organized resistance. Her eyes met mine. Recognition dawned in them like a terrible sunrise. She knew my methods. She'd heard me talk about optimization strategies over dinner for years. The precision, the timing, the calculated approach that made me so successful. 3 days passed in a blur of strained silences and avoided glances. Then Thursday arrived with a gut punch. Our daughter came home from school, her little face crumpled with confusion. Emma's birthday party was this weekend. She'd been uninvited. The invitation rescinded via a terse email from Emma's mother. I knew that name. Angela Morrison. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Angela had worked at Meridian, accounts receivable, one of the 50. That evening, I sat in my my home office, staring at a blank document. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Should I reach out to the affected families? Explain my side? The cursor blinked accusingly. I started typing. The company was failing. Paused. Added. But that doesn't excuse everything. Deleted it all. Started again. Deleted again. Finally closed the laptop and retrieved a hidden external drive from the back of my filing cabinet. School pickup the next day became a gauntlet. Whispered conversations died as I approached. Parents suddenly found their phones fascinating. I collected my son from his classroom, his small hand warm in mine. As we walked to the car, he looked up with innocent eyes and asked why Emma's mom had pointed at us and called me that man. The weekend brought another surprise. Saturday morning, I opened our front door to get the newspaper and found a manila envelope on the doormat. No postage, hand delivered. Inside were printed screenshots of my old LinkedIn posts. My own words mocked me from the pages. Proud to announce another successful streamlining at Meridian Corp. 30% reduction in overhead achieved in record time. Posted 2 weeks after the first sewer slide. I carried the papers to the backyard, my hands shaking. The fire pit hadn't been used since summer. I crumpled the pages, struck a match. The smoke curled up into the morning sky. Movement caught my eye. Our neighbor, Mrs. Chen, peering over the fence. Her expression shifted from curiosity to concern. She disappeared quickly, but I saw her through the kitchen window, phone pressed to her ear. Monday brought new developments. Vivian showed me a text from her sister Rebecca. Someone from her company had connected with her on a dating app, seemed very interested in talking about Rebecca's family. So Thomas is this big shot consultant who retired early after making bank. But now Xavier's digging up dirt about those Meridian layoffs from 5 years ago? I'm curious why Xavier waited until after getting humiliated to pull this card. Seems like he's been. Specifically about her brother-in-law's current work situation. The messages felt probing, calculated. Xavier's campaign was expanding. 5 families received detailed emails about potential legal action. Not threats, exactly. Just information about their rights, about statutes of limitations, about class action possibilities. My name wasn't mentioned directly, but the implications hung heavy as storm clouds. That night, Vivian moved to the guest room. I heard her through the thin walls typing on her laptop. The search history she left open the next morning told its own story. Spouse hidden past. Corporate liability for consultant actions. Protecting assets in civil lawsuits. I spent Tuesday morning in the basement, going through old boxes until I found it. The external hard drive I'd hidden away, containing all my consulting files from 2019. My hands trembled as I plugged it in. The files were all there. Spreadsheets, presentations, emails, including one dated 2 weeks before the first termination, where I'd outlined voluntary exit incentive tactics using carefully coded language. Phrases like encourage self-selection and optimize departure timing that meant something very different in practice. Wednesday's Mommy and Me group was my weekly anchor, a place where I was just another parent. But when I arrived, the coordinator pulled me aside. Several members had expressed discomfort. Perhaps I could skip this week's session just until things settled down. Her smile was sympathetic but firm. Thursday brought a call from our financial advisor. Someone had contacted his office with an unusual inquiry about our accounts, claiming to need employment verification. They'd used Vivian's maiden name, known only to close family and old friends. He'd refused to provide information, of course, but thought we should know. By Friday, I couldn't take the passive waiting anymore. I drove to the coffee shop on Maple Street, the one Xavier had mentioned in one of his LinkedIn posts. There he was, at a corner table with Angela Morrison. I chose a seat close enough to hear but angled away, opened my laptop and pretended to work. Angela was crying. Her husband's depression after the layoff, the medication costs, the therapy bills. Her voice cracked as she pulled out a folder. My stomach dropped. She had my presentation slides, the ones about identifying flight risks and managing termination messaging. She slid them across to Xavier, mentioning her lawyer's name. The school counselor called Vivian that afternoon. Nothing alarming, she assured, but our daughter seemed worried about keeping secrets. Had mentioned something about mommy and daddy fighting. Just wanted to check if everything was okay at home. Over the weekend, Vivian mentioned she'd noticed Xavier at her gym twice, different times of day. He'd smiled, waved, acted surprised to see her. She'd also received several LinkedIn views from legal professionals she didn't know, all specializing in employment law. Monday morning, Connor from Vivian's office called me directly. We'd barely spoken since the consulting incident. His voice was strained. He wanted me to know that Xavier's father had been struggling before the layoffs, yes, but the way it was done, the timing, the method, it was cruel. He hung up before I could respond. I reached out to a former colleague, asked him to monitor Xavier's LinkedIn activity. The report back was concerning. Xavier was systematically connecting with employment lawyers specializing in wrongful termination, building a network, preparing. The restraining order attempt came on a Thursday. Xavier filed it claiming harassment and stalking, citing the coffee shop incident. The judge denied it, insufficient evidence of threat, but the legal fees to defend against it drained our emergency fund. $5,000 to prove I hadn't done anything wrong, yet. Friday evening, Vivian's mother called. Such a nice young man had introduced himself at the grocery store. So polite, so concerned about our family. He'd mentioned working with Vivian, hoped everyone was doing well during these difficult times. Xavier was expanding his reach, mapping our entire family network. As I sat in my home office that night, surrounded by legal documents and bank statements, I realized this was just the beginning. 25 moves into Xavier's chess game, and he was still just positioning his pieces. The real battle hadn't even started. The hidden hard drive sat in my desk drawer like a ticking bomb. Evidence of my methods, my calculations, my careful optimization of human resources that had optimized 3 people right into their graves. Outside, suburban life continued its peaceful rhythm, unaware that 2 men were preparing for a war that would leave no winners, only casualties. My phone buzzed. Another LinkedIn notification, another connection request from another lawyer, another piece moving into position on Xavier's board. Xavier's calculated assault on my reputation intensified over the following weeks. He'd positioned himself at Vivian's parents' favorite coffee shop, expressing concern about my mental state. He mentioned witnessing me watching him at the Maple Street location, conveniently omitting that he'd orchestrated the meeting with Angela Morrison specifically to draw me there. I began recognizing his pattern. Social media posts from family members revealed Xavier appearing at their regular haunts. The Saturday farmers market where Rebecca shopped, the park where Vivian's father walked his dog. He was mapping our entire family's routines, studying us like specimens under a microscope. The daycare called with troubling news. Someone had attempted to ask questions about our children's schedules and emergency contacts. The staff refused per policy, but they wanted us aware of the unusual interest. My hands clenched the steering wheel as I drove home, knowing Xavier was probing for vulnerabilities. Rebecca texted Vivian in alarm. During their coffee meeting, Xavier had casually mentioned Vivian's college nickname, something only found in decade-old Facebook posts. His research went deeper than we'd imagined. Every digital footprint we'd left became ammunition in his arsenal. A local business journal published an article about corporate accountability, featuring Xavier as a source. He never mentioned my name, but his quotes about consultants who prioritize profits over people and the hidden cost of aggressive restructuring painted a clear picture for anyone following following our situation. The official notification arrived on a Tuesday. Child Protective Services would conduct an investigation within 30 days based on an anonymous report of potential neglect. The complaint cited a parent's unstable behavior and concerning isolation of children from community activities. My stomach churned as I read the bureaucratic language that could tear our family apart. Two fathers from school approached me separately at pickup. Xavier had contacted them about signing a community safety petition. Both declined, but their discomfort was evident. One mentioned that Xavier seemed obsessed, spending hours researching legal precedents on his phone while their kids played at the park. Through Connor, I learned disturbing details about Xavier's father. Two performance warnings had been documented before I'd even arrived at Meridian. The man had been struggling with prescription costs for his wife's cancer treatment, leading to decreased productivity. This context didn't absolve my actions, but it complicated Xavier's narrative of a stellar employee destroyed by heartless restructuring. My phone lit up with a Facebook message from an unexpected source, Xavier's ex-girlfriend from 3 years ago. Her warning chilled me. Xavier had spent years planning elaborate revenge against his graduate thesis advisor, who'd given him a failing grade. She'd watched him systematically destroy the professor's reputation through anonymous complaints and coordinated student protests. The pattern was familiar. At the next PTA meeting, I sat silently in the back row, while Xavier raised concerns about community values and the importance of knowing who had access to our children. His meaningful glances in my direction weren't subtle. Several parents shifted uncomfortably, caught between sympathy for his loss and discomfort with his methods. Vivian's office holiday party loomed next week. Rebecca mentioned that Xavier had asked to be her +1, claiming he wanted to support her during this difficult family time. The thought of him circulating among Vivian's colleagues, planting seeds of doubt about our marriage, made my jaw clench. Debbie from accounts reached out privately. Her conscience had been bothering her since the consulting incident. She admitted that a termination list had existed before my arrival, but I transformed it into something more targeted. My suggestion to use performance reviews to justify for-cause terminations had saved the company unemployment insurance costs while destroying families' financial safety nets. The weight of that decision pressed down on me like a physical force. During our daughter's soccer game, Xavier volunteered to take a team photo with Vivian's phone. Later, she discovered location services had been activated for all contacts. Neither of us could prove who'd made the change, but the violation of privacy added another layer to our growing paranoia. Through Rebecca, Xavier delivered an ultimatum: donate $100,000 to an emergency fund for affected families, and he'd cease his campaign. The amount was calculated, enough to hurt but not bankrupt us. Rebecca's hands shook as she relayed the message, clearly uncomfortable being used as an intermediary. Vivian discovered her location sharing had been enabled for all contacts. We spent an hour checking our phones, tablets, and laptops for any other security breaches. Trust eroded between us, as we each wondered if the other had made changes for their own purposes. Well, Xavier just went from concerned citizen to full-time revenge hobbyist. The man's treating stalking like it's his new CrossFit routine. Nothing says I'm handling grief well, quite like memorizing your enemy's wife's college nickname from ancient Facebook posts. Xavier had managed to weaponize our own suspicions against each other. Cleaning out old files, I found the receipt that changed my perspective. A luxury vacation booking dated 1 week after the Meridian layoffs. My bonus had been 10% of the company's savings from the restructuring, enough for first-class flights and 5-star hotels, while terminated employees struggled to pay rent. The paper crumbled in my fist as shame washed over me. Xavier's influence grew as 2 more families joined his information-gathering network. He'd shared my original optimization presentations with them, highlighting phrases like deadwood removal and efficiency maximization that sounded inhuman when applied to people's livelihoods. The clinical language I'd once prided myself on now read like a sociopath's manifesto. Digging deeper into my old files, I discovered documentation that made my stomach turn. I'd recommended challenging unemployment claims to discourage other employees from leaving. One of the sewer slide victims had been denied benefits based on the for-cause termination I'd engineered. His family's finances had spiraled while fighting the decision. My signature on the recommendation felt like blood on my hands. Vivian refused to take sides, but admitted she'd been documenting our conversations in a notebook hidden in her car. She was preparing for potential legal issues, maybe even separation. The woman who'd once trusted me completely now treated me like a liability to be managed. Rebecca's phone revealed the extent of Xavier's surveillance. He'd been screenshotting their text conversations about me for 3 months, building a profile of my habits, weaknesses, and family dynamics. Every casual mention of my whereabouts or mood had been cataloged for future use. The urge to retaliate grew stronger. I researched private investigators, considering hiring one to dig into Xavier's past, but stopping myself at the last moment, I realized I was becoming exactly what Xavier claimed, someone who destroyed others to protect himself. The investigator's website stayed bookmarked but unclicked. During school pickup, Xavier appeared beside my car. He mentioned seeing our daughter's favorite teddy bear alone at the park, describing its location with unnerving accuracy. The implicit threat about our children's vulnerability made my hands shake as I buckled them into their car seats. He smiled and walked away before I could respond. Nicole finally admitted the truth during a private meeting. She'd known about the family impacts of the restructuring, but needed quick results to make Meridian attractive for acquisition. We shared culpability in the tragedy, both prioritizing financial outcomes over human costs. Her confession offered no comfort, only confirmed that the system rewarded those who could stomach such choices. Xavier's support network began fracturing when an employment lawyer explained the weak legal case. At-will employment laws meant the terminations, while morally questionable, were legally sound. Several families withdrew from his campaign, exhausted by false hope and unable to afford continued legal consultations. The school community split into 3 distinct camps. Team Thomas consisted mainly of other stay-at-home parents who feared their own past careers being scrutinized. Team Xavier drew from those who'd experienced corporate downsizing, but the majority formed a third group, parents who wanted both of us gone, viewing our conflict as a toxic influence on the community. A petition circulated requesting a fresh start through voluntary withdrawal of both parties. Financial pressure mounted as I liquidated retirement investments. The potential lawsuit required preparation, and Vivian needed assurance that the children's futures were protected regardless of what happened to me. I told her it was for our family's security, but we both knew I was preparing for war. Xavier's carefully constructed image cracked during a conversation with Rebecca. His initial approach had been calculated, but he claimed genuine feelings had developed. Rebecca recorded the conversation, uncomfortable with being manipulated but unsure whose side deserved support. His admission revealed the complexity of his motivations, genuine grief twisted into targeted vengeance. Other stay-at-home parents reached out privately with messages of support. They understood the judgment I faced, the assumptions about my worth based on my employment status, but none would risk public association with someone tainted by scandal. Their off-the-record conversations offered hollow comfort. Xavier's obsession began affecting his work performance. His supervisor documented concerns about missed deadlines and distracted behavior. He spent work hours researching legal options, printing documents about wrongful termination suits and making personal calls during meetings. The very focus that made him dangerous was undermining his professional stability. Angela Morrison revealed the final piece of the puzzle. Xavier's father's termination letter had referenced a pattern of errors using the exact template language I'd created. My methodology had become Meridian's standard practice, institutionalizing the cold efficiency I'd pioneered. Every termination since bore my fingerprints, even those I'd never directly influenced. Despite everything, I maintained our family routines. Morning drop-offs, afternoon pickups, soccer practices, and bedtime stories continued with forced normalcy, but cracks showed everywhere. Our daughter asked why she and Emma no longer played together, her innocent confusion a knife to my heart. Children absorbed adult conflicts like sponges, no matter how we tried to shield them. Vivian's family divided over the situation. Her parents maintained careful neutrality, prioritizing their relationship with their grandchildren, but her siblings openly supported Xavier's position, viewing me as a corporate monster who'd infiltrated their family. Holiday planning became a minefield of negotiations and separate celebrations. Xavier's credibility took a hit when a former colleague revealed he'd been fired from his previous job for creating a hostile work environment. His pattern of obsessive grievances and targeted campaigns emerged, but this revelation came too late to fully restore my reputation. The damage was done, the community's trust shattered. Our marriage counselor suddenly became unavailable for appointments. Vivian and I argued about whether Xavier had contacted her, spreading his poison even into our attempts at healing. Trust eroded further as we questioned every inconvenience, every setback, wondering if Xavier's hand was behind it. A local parenting blog published a piece titled, "When Past Careers Haunt SAHPs," that might as well have used our names. The details matched too perfectly. The corporate consultant turned stay-at-home parent, the workplace confrontation, the community fallout. Comment sections filled with judgment from strangers who knew only fragments of the story. Reviewing old performance evaluations, I found evidence that Xavier's father's medical leave requests had been reclassified as performance concerns in the system I'd designed. Time off for his wife's chemotherapy appointments became attendance issues. Bereavement leave after her death was noted as lack of focus. My efficient system had transformed human tragedy into data points justifying termination. Vivian's annual review arrived with troubling language about external distractions affecting team dynamics. Her partnership track, once assured, now showed jeopardy. Xavier's campaign had achieved its goal of making my sins affect those I loved. She worked late every night, trying to overcome the stigma of association with me. During a private conversation with Rebecca, Xavier's mask finally slipped completely. When she suggested moderation, perhaps focusing on healing rather than revenge, his face contorted with cold fury. He accused her of betraying his father's memory, of being corrupted by her family's privilege. Rebecca left the meeting shaken, finally understanding the depth of his rage. The realization hit me during a sleepless night. Any victory in this battle meant my children would grow up known as the kids whose father drove people to sewer slide. No amount of context or justification would erase that label. They'd carry my choices like a genetic disease, affecting their friendships, their opportunities, their own sense of identity. I spent days crafting a letter to Xavier, acknowledging the pain I'd caused while defending the business necessity of my actions. Each draft felt either too apologetic or too defensive. Finally, I settled on simple truth. I'd optimized human resources like numbers on a spreadsheet, forgetting the families behind each data point. I mailed it to his workplace, hoping for reconciliation but expecting escalation. The workplace consequences for Xavier mounted. The office manager requested he work from home due to the disruption his campaign caused. His colleagues, initially sympathetic, grew tired of his obsession dominating every conversation. He'd transformed from a grieving son into a disruptive force, but blamed the consequences on his pursuit of justice rather than his methods. Rebecca provided Vivian with a recording that changed everything. Xavier had admitted targeting her specifically for information access, viewing her as the weak link in our family's defenses. His calculated manipulation of her trust, disguised as romantic interest, revealed the depths of his planning. Even Vivian, who'd maintained neutrality, felt sickened by the exploitation. Xavier's performance improvement plan at work documented his refusal to acknowledge any professional shortcomings. He attributed every mistake to the stress of seeking justice, unable to see how his obsession had consumed his competence. His supervisor's notes showed increasing concern about his stability and judgment. Xavier's telling himself he's doing this for his dad while sabotaging his own job and life. The guy's documenting Thomas's every move but can't see how he's destroying himself in the process. That's some serious blind spot he's got there. I watched Xavier's car creep past our house after dark, his headlights moving deliberately slowly. I documented the date, time, and license plate, building my own file of evidence. The hunter had become prey to his own tactics, each of us cataloging the other's movements in an endless cycle of surveillance and suspicion. Vivian delivered her ultimatum with exhausted resignation rather than anger. Handle this through legal channels or lose her and the children. She couldn't make eye contact during the conversation, her voice flat with emotional depletion. The marriage that had survived career changes, financial stress, and parenting challenges was crumbling under the weight of my past. Xavier's termination from his job happened on a Tuesday that started with security escorting him from the building. I learned about it through Connor, who described Xavier's final moments at the office, muttering about justice while glaring at colleagues who'd grown tired of his disruption. Within hours, Xavier had emailed a manifesto to the entire company, detailing my consulting history and his father's story. The damage to my reputation spread through another corporate network, but at least his professional platform was gone. Vivian and I attempted a normal weekend, but she scheduled every minute with activities designed to avoid being alone together. Soccer practice, grocery shopping, playdates, anything that prevented conversation about our crumbling foundation. The kids sensed the tension, our daughter asking why mommy kept checking her phone during story time, our son clinging to me longer at bedtime. Some school parents expressed relief that the drama might finally end with Xavier's job loss. They smiled cautiously at pickup, testing whether it was safe to acknowledge my existence again. But the distance remained. Years of suburban social capital had evaporated in months. I coached soccer practices where half the team was mysteriously absent, organized playdates that got canceled last minute with transparent excuses. I created a website documenting the full context of Meridian's financial crisis before the layoffs. Charts showed quarterly losses, competitor acquisitions, the death spiral the company faced without intervention, but few cared about context. The internet had already decided my story. Truth couldn't compete with the narrative of corporate cruelty. My carefully researched data points felt hollow against the weight of 3 memorial photographs. Vivian's partnership review got postponed indefinitely, her firm citing pending resolution of personal matters. Her career momentum stalled while male colleagues advanced past her. She worked longer hours, trying to prove her value wasn't diminished by association with me. I watched her exhaustion deepen, knowing my past had poisoned her future. Angela Morrison's lawyer sent formal notice of intent to sue, giving us 30 days to respond. The letter outlined claims of intentional infliction of emotional distress, wrongful termination, and negligence negligent supervision. My lawyer reviewed it with grim efficiency, explaining that while the legal merits were questionable, the cost of defense would be substantial. Settlement might be cheaper than victory. A business school blog picked up the story, analyzing the Meridian method as a case study in ethically questionable optimization. My techniques became required reading for what not to do. Professors used my presentations to teach about the human cost of treating employees as spreadsheet entries. My legacy was set, a cautionary tale for future MBAs. I assembled evidence showing that 70% of terminated employees had found new positions within 6 months. Industry average was only 40% for similar layoffs. My targeted approach, while harsh, had focused on those most likely to land quickly. But presenting this data felt like defending the indefensible. Statistics couldn't resurrect the dead or heal broken families. Vivian took the children to her parents for spring break. What started as a week stretched longer. She needed space to think, she explained during brief phone calls. Her parents maintained cordial distance, allowing video calls with the kids but avoiding direct conversation with me. I heard my daughter ask when they were coming home, heard Vivian's non-answer. Xavier filed his civil suit 1 week before the deadline. He'd found 2 other families willing to join as plaintiffs, seeking damages for intentional infliction of emotional distress. The lawsuit demanded compensation for therapy costs, lost wages, and punitive damages. My lawyer estimated legal fees alone would reach 6 figures, win or lose. The suit included a claim about unjust enrichment that my lawyer called legally weak but publicly damaging. Xavier had calculated my bonus from the restructuring, contrasting it with his father's final desperate emails about medical bills. The optics were devastating. My vacation photos from that period suddenly evidence of blood money. School friends started canceling playdates, citing the ongoing legal situation. Parents explained to their children that sometimes friendships had to end because of adult problems. I overheard my daughter on a video call with Emma, both girls crying as Emma's mother ended their communication. The social isolation spread to our children like a contagion. My defense attorney had a reputation for aggressive tactics. He warned that mounting a full defense would require exposing everyone's actions. Xavier's harassment, his ex-girlfriend's testimony about his vindictive patterns, his father's performance issues. Mutual destruction seemed the only path forward. Victory would taste like ash. The settlement offer arrived through lawyers. Admit no wrongdoing but pay $200,000 to a victims fund. The amount was calculated to hurt without destroying us completely. My attorney recommended accepting. Trials were unpredictable, and this would end things cleanly. But cleanly felt like a lie when everything was already stained beyond repair. Xavier's lawyer crossed ethical lines by requesting our children's school records, fishing for evidence of neglect or distress. Even some of Xavier's supporters expressed discomfort with targeting kids. The request was denied, but it showed how far he'd go. The children had become pawns in his game of vengeance. The judge ordered mediation before trial. The courthouse conference room felt sterile, metal detectors at the entrance reminding everyone how contentious this had become. A bailiff stood by the door, present in case tempers exploded. Xavier sat across from me, his jaw clenched, hands folded precisely on the table. My lawyer revealed evidence about Xavier's father's expense report irregularities, small infractions that predated my involvement but established a pattern. Xavier shouted that it was irrelevant, his composure finally cracking. The mediator called a recess, letting everyone cool down. Truth was messier than anyone's narrative. During the break, Xavier admitted to Rebecca that he'd spent his entire inheritance on legal fees. Credit cards maxed out, savings depleted. He insisted some things mattered more than money, but his financial desperation showed. The crusade had consumed everything, leaving him as broken as those he claimed to defend. Angela Morrison realized Xavier had pushed her toward the lawsuit for his own agenda. She gathered her papers and left the mediation, pausing at the door to look at both of us. Her words cut deep. We were both poisoned, using grief as weapons. Her withdrawal weakened Xavier's position, but brought no satisfaction. The mediator presented our choice starkly. Sign a mutual non-disclosure agreement and walk away, or proceed to trial that would damage everyone. The NDA would seal all records, prevent future contact, and include mutual restraining orders. Modern, mutually assured destruction, ensuring silence through legal force. I agreed to never mention the performance issues if Xavier dropped all claims. The comprehensive settlement included no admission of wrongdoing from either side. We signed papers that felt like prison bars, trapping us both in our versions of truth. Neither of us won. The families got nothing. Only lawyers profited. Xavier was forced to accept or face a countersuit for defamation he couldn't afford. He signed while shaking with rage, whispering threats the court reporter couldn't catch. The mediator reminded us both that violation of the agreement meant immediate legal consequences. We were bound together in enforced silence. The settlement included mutual restraining orders and social media silence. Neither could mention the other online, in person, or through third parties. We'd created our own private Cold War, each knowing the other's secrets but unable to speak them. The weight of unspoken truth would follow us forever. That evening, Vivian filed for separation. She explained she couldn't trust someone capable of what I'd done, even if legal. The marriage that survived career changes and parenthood couldn't survive the revelation of who I'd been. Her lawyer had already drawn up custody arrangements favoring stability for the children. The mediation was sealed by court order. Both Xavier and I were trapped by our own actions, unable to share our sides of the story without legal consequences. We'd built our own cages through mutual destruction. The truth would die with us, replaced by whispers and speculation. I suspected Xavier shared his version at bars and parties, careful to avoid names but clear in implications. Without proof, I couldn't act. The agreement bound us in permanent stalemate. His shadow would lurk at the edges of my life forever, a ghost of consequences that couldn't be exercised. The children adjusted to split custody with the resilience kids always show. My daughter stopped asking about Emma, learning early that some friendships don't survive adult choices. She developed new friends at her mother's neighborhood, children whose parents didn't know our history. A new equilibrium emerged after months of upheaval. I rebuilt slowly, finding work as an independent consultant for small businesses that didn't Google deeply. Vivian thrived professionally without my shadow, making partner within a year. Xavier's presence lurked at the periphery, a face glimpsed at grocery stores, a familiar car in traffic, always just within legal boundaries. 2 years later, I collected the kids from Vivian's house where she lived with someone she described as less complicated. My daughter mentioned casually that a man at her new school had asked about Daddy. Maybe Xavier, maybe another victim's relative, maybe paranoia. But I knew this haunting was forever, that some sins echo through generations, and the price of brutal efficiency is paid in installments that never end. Thanks for letting me wonder about all these curious moments with you today. Really enjoyed questioning things together. See you next time.